You all, I was sitting here reading from this book by Richard Rothstein or Stein called The Color of Law, A Forgotten History of How Government Segregated America. It's a really good read. I suggest some of you may consider picking it up at your local bookstore if they yet exist. I'm reading this because it has a lot to do with the history of what we're talking about here, this whole Roe versus Wade thing, white evangelicalism, and the plot, the ploy, I don't know, this red herring, this dog whistle, this delusion. Okay, I'm trying to figure out other words to put in here about this whole abortion thing. I would like to say though, welcome back to Y2K. That's what this is. This is Y2K all over again. And what do I mean by that? Back in 2018, I gave a prophetic word about the Supreme Court justices. Some of you remember that. And I talked about how God is going to use, not everybody's crying the Joshua generation. Every time somebody dies, a pastor or leader, then Joshua sermons pop up. And I said, nah, bump that. The Lord is using judges. And he's going to use the judges to stir up some stuff here in America. Y'all remember that, sure? Remember that? Mm-hmm. God is still, again, right now, meddling in our politics. Today I'm going to show you that there are three scriptures that in one book, just one book, three scriptures back to back that kind of explains the good outcome of what could happen, but with bad intent. You might want to hang around for this because it might be long, but I'm going to shake up some things so that you all can go back to reading and studying American history. See you in 60. Bass.
It's the show that will get you thinking, and where the topics are hot. Feel free to comment whether we agree or not, 'cause he's got something to say. Sirwalterj Jones. Sirwalterj Jones. He's got something to say. Sirwalterj Jones. Sirwalterj Jones Show.
Come on in. The water's fine. Hello, everybody. Sirwalterj Jones Show. I'm here. It is the weekend edition, baby. How y'all was? Come on in. The water's fine. The water's fine. I think. I don't know. Now I just want to warn y'all. This is gonna be kind of a long show here because, well, I just don't know how to do short shows on especially Sunday nights. Well, I think every night. Today we're talking about abortion and Roe versus Wade, and well, you know what I'm saying? Happy Mother's Day for those of you who are watching this at the time of mothers on this day. Happy Mother's Day. I know some of you know that my mother went to be with the Lord in 2019. It was a very, very crazy year for me because I lost first my grandmother, and then a couple months later, I lost my mother. They're not lost. We know where they are. Lost my pastor at the beginning of the year, and then the new first lady of the church lost her. And so they're not lost. We know where they are. All right. And so I think there's a timing for everything. So, but nevertheless, I thank God for the memory of my dear mother. As a matter of fact, my dear friend, Diane, sometimes, okay, but Diane, Donald McDonald. I've known her for many, many years, over 20-something years now, and she gave me a beautiful memory of my grandmother and mother on yesterday, or the day before yesterday, and I want to share this with you all. I thought it was very beautiful. This here, let me remove that. This is my grandmother here, and this is my mom. Forever remembered, forever missed. And it has a beautiful little light here on it. When you pressed it, if it was dark in the room, then you would see how it changes colors. I thought it was one of the most beautiful gifts that someone could give me, and it lights up. So sometimes I turn the light off and let this light up my night as I'm working. All right, so beautiful. It sits on my desk, and so thank you, Diane, for this wonderful gift. I will cherish this forever, and it weighs a ton. It weighs a ton, but it was so beautiful. Amen. All right, and so the memory of my mother is something special to all of us. There's 9 of us, and so I thank God because it's getting better for me each Mother's Day. Last year was tough. It was really rough, very, very hard. This year, it's getting better, and I know for those of you who have lost your mothers, it may be up and down for years. I hear about that, and so today actually was a good day, especially hearing from my children. I heard from my son yesterday, and the Lord is really blessing him. My son drives limousines for many very popular and very rich men and women in the Atlanta, Georgia area. And yesterday he was telling me about a ride he took from an NFL player, very, very famous. I'm not going to say his name. They love my son, and they request my son to drive them around town whenever they come. And my son wants to start his own limousine service. And so we are getting that done. And so around this time next year, he will be up and going. So he was telling me how he was driving into this big mansion, and this NFL player built a tunnel to go under his house, and it pulls into a basketball court. A basketball court. And he just was amazed by it. And while my son was driving up under that house, he gets this text from Jonathan McReynolds, who my son and Jonathan McReynolds are like best friends. I kind of raised them together. And Jonathan had texted him, said, "Hey, you want to drive for the Kirk Franklin concert tour?" And so my son said, duh. He said, "First of all, how much is it?" Because my son is a businessman. And so Jonathan told him, he said, "Yes." So my son will be doing the Kirk Franklin tour. He is the driver for the all of the acts. So I am just tickled pink for what God is doing. And my other son, Eric, will be graduating from Morehouse next weekend. So I will be flying to Atlanta to stand there and sit there or scream at my son as he walk across that Morehouse stage to be a Morehouse man. So the Lord is blessing my home, and I thank God for what he's doing. So if these babies were aborted, I would not have had the opportunity to talk to y'all about how God is blessing my home. If my mother had aborted me, there would not be a Sir Walter Jones show, and there most likely would not be the Bunkers. Now, y'all would be here, but you wouldn't be called the Bunkers. You'd be called something else. All right? So I thank God for what he's done. If I was to change my career, I believe I'd be a social science teacher or history teacher or something like that, because I have a lot of encounters with people, and the Lord has blessed me to have these encounters so that I could do what I do on this platform here. I have a lot of books, a few hundred books that I study, I read. I am a bookworm, and I'm always in my books. And people often ask me why you know so much. Is because I believe in reading. I am an avid reader. Now, I can't show y'all my whole library because it's too vast. But I want to show y'all a lot of the books that I do read that's very popular that some of you already know of. This is White Too Long, Robert P. Jones. And so I'm bringing y'all these, telling y'all about these books because I want to kind of properly vet you on why I'm talking or how I'm able to know the stuff that I know as it pertains to this subject matter on Roe versus Wade. This is the legacy of white supremacy in America. Now you're going to see a unity in these books, in the titles of these books, a particular topic, okay? This is White Too Long, Robert P. Jones, all right? One of my favorites here. This is Republican Jesus by Tony Ketty, How the Right Has Rewritten the Gospels. So y'all already see it, don't you? This is called the immoral majority, not the moral majority, the immoral majority. Why evangelicals choose political power over Christian values. Oh, I'm going to dig into that today. This is by Ben Howe. All right. And then I'm going to tell y'all who I am. So y'all be like, how is he that? And he's reading these kind of books. The End of White Christian America, another great book. By Robert P. Jones. Robert tend to like to, and y'all like, wait a minute, you a liberal, aren't you? White Fragility. All y'all know about this book here. By Robin. This is why it's so hard for white people to talk about racism. I know. This one here is called The Color of Compromise. The Color of Compromise. The truth about the American church's complicity. Complicity in racism. Brilliant writing. You're like, aren't you a... Yeah. Plantation Jesus. Race, Faith, A New Way Forward. Scott Welch, Rick Wilson. Great book. I know y'all got these books. Okay? Oh, I got more. Hold on. I got more. Hold on. Some of these you're like, it doesn't, why you reading those? Because this is my setup. This is called On Tyranny. 12 Lessons from the 12th Century, Timothy Snyder. Little pamphlet here, powerful. Big things come in small packages. This one here is called White Kids. Growing Up with Privilege in a Racially Divided America. White Kids. This one is called A Generation of Sociopaths. How the Baby Boomers Betrayed America. Bruce Gibney. Several of these books I did not buy. Remember the Diane person that I've mentioned? She works for the University of Chicago or Illinois. I get them mixed up. And these wealthy white kids come from all over, and these wealthy Asians come from all over the world, and they come here to get their education. And they buy all these books for class. And then when it's time for them to go on spring break or away for the summer, back home for the summer, they leave all these books at the university. They throw them in the garbage. Diane picked up the phone and said, hey, it's time for you to come pick up some books. And so a lot of these books come from the university. White Kids, Language, Race, and Styles of Youth Identity. I read them all. The Great Transformation, the political and economic origins of our time. Mothers of Massive Resistance. Great book. White Women and the Politics of White Supremacy. White women can be and historically have been known to be the most dangerous person in America. Willie Lynch, the Willie Lynch letter and the makings of a slave. White evangelical racism, the politics of morality in America. Butler. You're like, boy, you sure got a lot of white books. Yes, I do. The social construction of whiteness. the social construction of white women, whiteness, race matters. Okay? The morality of war. I wish I could go through all these with y'all, one by one. Empires in the world, because I'm a history buff. Not just American history, world history. This book talks about the wealth of empires, how they's formed, and you will find the United States borrowed. Imperialism. This is a wonderful book that's very special to me because this is called Beyond Black and White. This is by James P. Comer, Dr. Comer. I am honored and privileged to be traveling to Yale University in 2 weeks. All right, so I'm gonna be gone for a little while. I'm in Atlanta next week, and the following week I will be speaking and doing a closing remark because Yale University, at once being a very racist organization, and again I'm getting ready to go into that history. Black folks were not allowed, nor were women allowed. Here now is a black man, one of the professors there, who is now having an unveiling, a portrait unveiling, and I have been chosen to give closing remarks for that. So this is his book here. So honored that the Lord has opened up doors. Now, last but certainly not least, all right, here's the Constitution of the United States. I keep it with me at all times because you never know when you're going to get pulled over by the police, okay? All right? And here are two of my favorite books on the Constitution. They're very thick. This is Akil Reed Amar, America's Constitution. All right? Very thick, very powerful. And these constitutional books talk about the history of the Constitution and how they can be flawed. This is the unwritten Constitution by the same author. All right? And again, I'll explain to y'all in a minute why I'm doing this. This is by Tom Hartman, The Hidden History of the Supreme Court and the Betrayal of America. Now we're getting down into the deep parts of why I am here today. I know it took me a long time to get here, and some of y'all probably already left. But I wanted to properly vet myself so that y'all don't think that I'm talking out of my nose. You understand? Social justice, social work, social science. Whenever I go out into the streets of Chicago, I think about the people. I speak to people, poor people, the downtrodden. I always try and bring some cash on me because I never know when somebody is going to need something to eat. I pulled up to the cleaners who put some clothes in the cleaners, my clothes and my daughter Rebecca's clothes in the cleaners. And as I was walking up there was a man who was selling a massage chair. He obviously was a drunk. Wanted to sell me this massage chair, and I had to say, you know what, I'm not in the mood. Now, I'm always helping folks, so I don't feel guilty when I don't help somebody. But that one right there, I was not going to buy a hot item. So, no. I spoke to him, said no. I walked into the cleaners, I had a bag load of clothes, because for me and Becca, and I gave it to the guy, and he's sorting through them, and I saw the bill climbing. And a man walked in, you know, you could tell he was, he looked like he'd been through the war because of his face and what have you. But he spoke, and I'm not, oh, here we go against somebody selling something. And so, but my spirit said, speak to the man. How dare you not speak to him? Doesn't matter if he come in looking different to you, speak. So I said, hey, good to see you. Some blessings to you, by the way. He said, oh, thank you, man. And he pulled out $100 bill, and he gave it to the clerk. He says, this man's clothes is on me. And the clerk was like, okay, you know, his daughter's clothes. She said, I don't care. Pay the man. I'm buying the man's clothes, his cleaning. And I'm like, okay, well, thank you. Then now am I supposed to give you something back? What am I supposed to give back? He said, no, man. He said, the Lord has been good to me. I said, okay, this is why I should have been speaking to you then. And then he began to tell me about his name. He said, my name is Jackie Wilson. Oh, I said, you, Jackie Wilson dead. He said, no, not that Jackie Wilson. He said, I'm a part of that Burge case, a case in Chicago. Those of you who don't know who Burge is, he was a cop. He was a crooked cop in Chicago who was going around picking up black people and planting drugs and all kind of stuff and making them do false confessions and putting them in jail. Some of them were serving life because of Burge. White, prejudice, racist cop, bad cop. He says, I was one of them. And I'm on right now. We're going through a lawsuit right now with him. I said, really? He said, yeah. He said, take a picture. He said, take a picture with me. I said, okay. I said, I got to Google you to see if you're telling the truth. All right. So we did take a picture. Let me see. Do I have it here? All right. So that's the picture. That's me and Jackie Wilson. I'm like, okay, cute. Just another man, you know, pulling my tail. And then I go on Google and then I pull up the article and there it is. There he is. Yeah. The third trial of Jackie Wilson after allegations of torture at the hands of Burge ends stunningly with judge turning towards the prosecution. And they fired the prosecutor because they lied and they made up some stuff, all right? This murder case. I mean, this crazy stuff. So you never know who you're talking to. And when we try and ignore people who we feel are commoners, we are doing a disjustice, okay? Because there are more scriptures in the Bible about the poor and the destitute and the needy than there is about almost anything else other than sanctification, salvation, holiness, and what have you. The poor, the poor, the poor, the poor. And so these white evangelicals, right, with that white hat on your head, I look like a homeless too. It was cold in Chicago. These white evangelicals have a really horrible, racist history. And my white friends don't like to hear me talk about this, but I have to bring this up today because of the content. Even my black Republicans hate when I talk about this and bring this up, but I have to bring this up today because of the content of today. I am a black conservative. So I set y'all up with all these books that seem like it was against white fragility, but it's not against whiteness. It's against bigotry and racism. And I'm just against white racism as I'm against a black bigotry or hatred or to discriminate a person because of caste or something. Some of you who are pro-black. I'm against anything that is not for the personhood, the common man that the scriptures told us. So people are shocked when they hear me say I'm a black conservative. I'm very conservative, and that's all I know. So I did a video called "Why Are Evangelicals Obsessed with Abortion?" I did that video. I don't know, last year, I can't remember. All right, and I did that video, and a young man by the name of Michael K. Smith went into the comment section, and those of you can go on YouTube right now and look at his comment. It was lengthy, but it was compassionate. Michael K. Smith found me on, I think, Corey Miner's show, the Smart Christian, when I did his show, and I like Michael. I can tell he's like me. He's a black conservative, but he's probably more conservative in his content than I am. All right. I don't know, but he wrote me a very long comment that I want to address today. Usually when I talk about stuff on my shows, and I have several hundreds of shows out there, I don't usually change my mind or change my content. Now, I believe 98% of the content that I have out there, I don't really need to change. Have I progressed over the years? Yes. I might say something different than I would have said, but the foundation of my teaching is basically the same. So I didn't really need to watch the show that I called Why Are Evangelicals Obsessed with Abortion. I don't really need to watch that to find out what is it that he disagreed with, because I kind of know me. People who don't know me and are new to the Sirwalterj show will hear me say something blanketed and bold and think that is my whole stance, but they don't know my body of work down through the years. So the bunkers know what I believe and what I don't believe. So if I say something bold, you would think I'm saying that all whites are racist. The bunkers know I know better than that. And so you've got to go through my body of work to see my well-balancedness. So Michael K. Smith did write me. Matter of fact, I told him to inbox me so that I can follow up with you, because I like what he said. I like when people push me against some of the things that I say. All right? What are you saying here? I'm a black conservative as well, but I abhor racism. Thank you, Ron. Okay? So he said, "So Walter, I believe you to be honest and sincere in this video," because I was. "This is why I'm choosing to respond. Your opening does not correspond with research in the area of who gives to charity." Now, in that show, I believe I talked about how the Democrats tend to look after the poor, that is, more so, and maybe I said something in their monetary giving or something like that. All right, so he's pushing me on this, and again, I'm so glad he's doing this. Because I remember doing a show a few years ago where I talked about poor people give more than any group, financial group in the country. Poor people give more. I've been saying that for years. So I'm going to bring that up, my proof in that, because he also brings proof in a book that I did buy, because he said that he feels that I am a Berean, and I am. And so I went and researched what he asked me to research. He said in a book titled "Who Cares? Who Really Cares?" This is the book here that he's referring to. So I did buy it. I'm very much aware of Arthur C. Brooks, but I didn't have his book in my library. I do now, and I've gone through it, and what Arthur is saying, none of it surprised me whatsoever, because I've been teaching it for a long time. He says in the book entitled this, we find that Christian gives the most time and money to charity. True. White Christian make are the largest group of Christians. He says, well, there's more white people, so obviously, empirically, your assessment is wrong, he's saying. All right, I'll allow that. He says you also made charitable giving racial. All right. If a white evangelical serves at a food bank in their communities, they should be silent on abortion because they gave to the wrong race of people. He says, so Walter, this is a logical conclusion from you. All right. They should speak only if they give to help poor blacks too. Then he says, when Margaret Sanger targeted black and poor whites, and these are the groups that have the most abortions. I get his pushback. I'd like to make a reiteration to what I believe I said on the show and kind of fix some of the holes there. Again, I like Michael Smith, and I would love to break bread with him because I love his spirit. This thing about conservatism and giving is tricky because it's all about intent. Can somebody put that in the comment section? It's about intent. If a group gives more than another group, the question is, why are they giving? Why are they giving so much? So I went and found Arthur C. Brooks as he was doing a CBN commentary. All right, let's see, do I have it here? Yes. I want you to listen very closely to what he's saying, because white evangelicals do give a lot and maybe give the most, but why? Number two, because you hear the word evangelical, you only see white. When I was coming up, all I saw were black evangelicals. That's all I know. Number two, as a matter of fact, the church I belonged to was called the Evangelical Church of God in Christ. That's all I knew was evangelical. I didn't even know that it had turned, or it was getting ready to turn to something political. I joined that church in 1980 when Ronald Reagan was getting into the office. And I'm going to give you the history of the Ronald Reagan and the white evangelicals. And so evangelical was just something that we all were. And blacks voted Democrat during the time I was born. The switch had already happened. Do you understand? The switch already happened. Blacks were voting Republican. It was the Republican Party who gave us the man who gave us the Emancipation Proclamation. It's because, matter of fact, the Republican Party was birthed from this man. All right, because of the Whigs could not get along. So we get Abraham Lincoln. Abolitionists were popping up all over the place, and here Wheaton College was the birthplace of the abolitionists. I'll tell you about the history there. All right, and so black people then did the switch. White evangelicals denied the switch, but the switch happened. So the switch happened when I was born, and so all I knew was poor people giving the most. And those poor people had conservative values. The Church of God in Christ is 6 million strong. All I knew was conservatism. No liberals in my house or on my block, nor in all of the churches all right? And they gave. Do you understand? So when you listen to Arthur C. Brooks, listen closely to what he's saying about giving and white evangelicals.
Would you want to name several of them for us?
Yeah, sure. I'd be delighted. I wrote the book as a debate primer for conservatives. I get so tired of conservatives losing debates on TV, on the public stage, and around the Thanksgiving table, to be quite frank. Conservatives have done more for poor people than any movement in human history, yet we don't talk as if we cared about the poor, so I lay out 7 practices of highly effective conservatives. It's the last chapter of the book. I've been doing it with Congress, and now I share it with the public for the first time. The first is to make moral arguments, not materialistic arguments. Too many Americans believe that we as conservatives care only about money, care only about tearing things down. And the truth of the matter is we need to make moral arguments about compassion toward our fellow man and real fairness, not the liberal type. Liberals talk about fairness as equalizing income. We talk about fairness as rewarding hard work and personal responsibility. So the first is to be a moralist. The second is what I just said, fight for people, not against things. And then the third big area is going where we're not invited and stealing the best arguments from the left. Talk about social justice, talk about compassion, talk about fairness, and it will be very confusing to the left and highly satisfactory to the people who want to join us.
Well, I think you're right on.
Fight for people and not against things. That's the problem. Every time you hear the rallying cry, it's always a fight against people coming over the borders, against people aborting babies, against this, against that, instead of fighting for people, not compromise. All right. And so this is the evangelicals' fault. The Democrats may not be doing what is right, but it looks like the appearance that the Dems are doing what's right for the poor people. Although me being a black conservative, I have been saying on my show for years that Democrats have been guilty of keeping poor people poor. So the problem with these two political parties is poor people, minorities, vote Democrat, even though the Democratic parties they feel is bankrupting the government. And I again, conservative views, I believe that the government is too big. I'm for that. I'm for capitalism. I'm a capitalist, absolutely. Show me the money, and then give me the money. I made the money. All right, I'm for all of that. The Democratic Party appears to look after the poor, and they do, unfortunately. Why though? Both parties are guilty of bad intent. Both, yes. And Doug, you're right, having the form of godliness. So he's right. He started off by saying white evangelicals, conservatives, they give the most. But he said, but why? He said we need to look into the windows of the Democratic Party and see what they're doing and borrow from it. Come on, Marlene. It's hypocrisy, and in walks the abortion issue. The Constitution is just a piece of paper. The right to do anything is only as good as it is enforced. Doesn't matter what the law said. It only matters on how it is enforced. Do you hear me? I'm going to give y'all a little lesson here. Y'all better hold on to your seats if you can. Some of you don't like history, so you're going to leave. I don't really care. Never really. Hold on to your seats. I just want to make sure I was on the right Facebook page. It's really on a job description level. The Constitution talks about the job description of the government. Do you hear me? The United States is leaning against the Constitution instead of the Constitution being wrapped around the government. The United States is leaning against it. Like a bicycle with a kickstand. So because it is basically a job description, the Constitution, what happens when it goes under new management? When the midterms are coming up, a new president is installed, and then he puts in a Supreme Court justice. That's new management. Then it becomes a case of who wins the battle of interpretation. Understand? When two people or two nations go to war, whoever wins the war is given the power to brag or interpret what happens, even if it's false. This is why during the Civil War, the North did win, but the South was winning later on. The women of the Confederacy was putting up all of these racist statues all over America, right in front of y'all's faces. And they begin to rewrite history, especially in the southern states. The battle is about interpretation. It's human nature to abuse power. Human nature. So the Constitution tried to prepare the future nation for this coming abuse of power. The Constitution is about checks and it's about balances. And it's not a hierarchical setup. No one is bigger than the next one of the branches. Bicameral, I believe that is the term used. Nobody is to be trusted, but everybody gets their papers graded on what they did. So the president is not a king. He can't just do what he wants to, like Donald Trump was trying to say in his press conferences and his rallies. Like he can just do whatever. This is the father of Richard M. Nixon, in a sense. The father, Richard M. Nixon, had the same thing, and history is repeating itself. The early 1970s was going on from 2016 until until Biden got in the office. So the president is the law enforcement man, the rule of law. He's over that. All right? But if something happens in that office where somebody's crooked, he gets checked because he's not supreme. So one of the other branches check him. The Supreme Court will check him. So that's not the law. The Supreme Court could do something and Congress will say, no, we don't like the way you interpreted that. And so we're going to go back and rewrite it. Then Congress will write a bill and the president will say, nope, I don't like this bill. I'm going to veto it. It is a great system. It's the best system we have. The history of Roe versus Wade is a complex one on both sides. Started with Griswold, I believe, the case. Griswold versus Connecticut. All right? 1965. From there, we get March 1970. Roe then sues Texas, and it goes on and on. Roe was not the first one. Roe just got in. There were other types of Roe cases around America. It's like, what's the name, who did not get off of the seat for a white man. What's her name? Civil rights champion. She wasn't the first one. But the first one who did it just didn't have that political, that public look that was deemed to be decent from the powers that be. So they chose her because she fit the emotion, Rosa Parks. She fitted better. Y'all understand? So Roe was not the first one. Now, the history of the white evangelical, I was watching a documentary on PBS called God in America. If you get a chance to, you got to go to Amazon. I think Amazon Prime or someone. You may have to buy it now. God in America. The word evangelical, which I did a show on, comes from the Greek word euangelion. Euangelion. All right? It just simply means good news. That's where the problem starts right there. And when you watch a documentary and you do some of the research on where these people come from, John Wesley, you heard his name, George Whitefield, and Jonathan Edwards. These are the men, the founders of what was called the Great Awakening. There was a couple Great Awakenings. Black folks got Azusa Street. White folks got the Great Awakening. The problem here was modern theology, modernists. It started in Europe. And then it came to America in the 1800s, and these evangelicals, they will not call that, had a lifelong fight with these modernists. So in the 1900s, Christians published these papers called the Fundamental Papers, the Fundamentals. And these papers were to debunk all of these modernists who looked at the scriptures, the unadulterated word of God, God breathed, and these things and miracles and things. They said, no, this can't be true. This doesn't line up with science. And so the Bible is cute, but it's only inspirational. And these believers decided to create these papers called the Fundamentals, and they became known as the Fundamentalists. And when I was young, I remember being called a fundamentalist in the 1970s. The name is not used today, but fundamentalists are still there because I consider myself somewhat of a fundamentalist. In walked William Jennings Bryan, a name that sounds familiar to your ears, but you may have to research to find out who he is. A congressman, Secretary of State, and he was a Democratic candidate for president. And he ran for president 3 times. And I did a show on this, all right, because he fought against modernism and Darwinism. When I was coming up, it was all about Darwinism. And my parents told me to study, get the lesson, pass the class, and then delete that stuff from your mind. Darwinism. And he was rallying against that. He wanted to ban the teaching of evolution in the public schools. And of course, the ACLU back then, the same folk today, they jumped in to defend any teacher who was teaching evolution, to defend them. And so they decided to do a debate with Bryan in a court trial. All right. And I did this show called The Scopes Monkey Trial. Some of you may remember that. In 1925, this is where the problem really began, y'all. The Scopes Monkey Trial. All right, there it is. I believe that's the show there. It began here. And that trial utterly embarrassed fundamentalists. It was, the lawyer's name was Clarence Darrow. Clarence Darrow was arguing against William Jennings Bryan in court. It became a big fiasco, and this is WGN here in Chicago became famous because of that, because they set up their whole structure there in that town. Fundamentalists built a subculture of their own after this monkey trial embarrassment, because Clarence Darrow asked William Jennings a question about Adam and Eve and creation, and his answer made no sense. It made no sense. And they laughed fundamentalists to scorn, and then the fundamentalists went into exile. They're gone. All right? Years. They did not vote. They did not believe in politics. They considered politics evil and dirty and nasty, and they poof, gone. Where did they go, though? From the 1920s, 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, white evangelicals, poof, what were they doing? Bob Jones and his racist college, Bob Jones University. Separatism was his whole thing. And anti-intellectualism was his whole thing. You're going to start hearing some familiarity here, because when the Democrats talk about global warming and pandemic and COVID-19, listen to the rhetoric from white evangelicals. Listen to their rhetoric. Why? Because their father is Bob Jones. Separatism, they still like. Anti-intellectualism, they're against that. Against science. Because it is the fabric of who they are. Modernism versus fundamentalism. These two were left after the dust settled. Modernism, who was against the fundamental teachings of the scriptures. Fundamentalists who believed in the full and proven the faith of the scriptures, okay? Those two needed some type of common bond, because divide and conquer was weakening believers. And so one man came up with a great idea, and he called it neo-evangelism. His name was Harold Ockenga. Google his name. Neo-evangelicalism became evangelicals without the word neo. It just was easier to say. Who else walked in? The National Association of Evangelicals was birthed. Now they got their school, Bob Jones. They got an association, okay? And now they needed a cause. They needed a spokesman. Who was the spokesman? In walked the famous evangelist Billy Graham. Billy Graham attended Bob Jones University, but he didn't like what he saw. So he left there and enrolled here in Chicago at Wheaton College. And Billy Graham, his revivals were interracial. That's why you saw black people in the choir, musicians. He would bring in black singers. The white evangelicals didn't do that. Billy Graham did. Why? because there needed to be a common bond between modernist believers and fundamentalists. We needed somebody who was not a come up under the Bob Jones theology, but we need somebody to come up under the Wheaton College theology of abolitionists. Then, well, how did he become so famous, Billy Graham? The newspaper baron called William Randolph Hearst. You've been hearing his name too, and maybe in some of your college and what have you. William Randolph Hearst and Time magazine fell in love with Billy Graham. And that was during the time, like it will be today, how someone like a Kevin Samuels or someone became popular by the algorithm being shaken up, and you become a sensation online. We don't know how it happens, when it's going to happen. You can't pay for it to happen. You just begin to what's called trend. And once you trend, you can't stop that trend train. You just can't. Billy Graham started to trend because of these men, William Randolph Hearst. Okay? One reason because he was against communism, and anti-communism was very popular back then. What came out of that? Right here in Chicago, Christianity Today magazine was born under the auspices of Billy Graham. All right? Now, the history of white evangelicals kind of stopped there and let them do whatever they do over there. Black people was doing whatever they was doing over here. Never the two shall meet. But there was an issue here because the show was talking about abortion, but I want to show y'all why abortion is being yelled out of their mouths so much, because it's about intent. Google the man's name by his name, Paul Weyrich. Paul Weyrich, W-E-Y-R-I-C-H. Paul Weyrich is responsible for much of this. Not all of it, but much of this. And he's the one who gave us the moral majority. Not Gerald Falwell. Paul Weyrich did. Evangelicals did not want to jump in the political rings. Too dirty. But when the Supreme Court decided on the case called Brown versus the Board of Education, the case that desegregated schools in America, then they came out of hiding. This is not about abortion. This is about segregation. It always have been. It always will be. Abortion is a dog whistle. Y'all better hear me. Y'all don't want to hear me. They will deny it until they turn blue, green, purple, because the real colored folks are white people. The real colored folks are white people. Black people, we stay the same, but white folks turn colors. Okay, whatever happens in them emotionally, they turn a whole bunch of colors. Okay, so they're really colored people. I'm trying to tell you, this is not about abortion. This is about racism and separatism. Y'all better hear me on this. When public schools were desegregated in the 1950s, white evangelicals and even some Catholics left the school systems in droves. They were out. Poof! Remember the vice president, who was the vice president right now, was running against Biden? And remember when they were talking, when she turned to him and told him about the busing that he approved in Congress and how it affected her and her family? So if anybody should be, Kamala Harris should be teaching this with me tonight. They left in droves because they said, we cannot have my white baby learning with this black baby and this. No. So they begin to send their kids to what's called segregated academies. That's why it's so many around America. It didn't just pop up overnight. They've been there. Segregated academies. And these were religious schools that only admitted white people. More than 750,000 white children are estimated to have attended more than 3,000 segregated academies during the first half of the 1970s. Gone away from those schools. They're like, poof, they was pulling those white kids out of those schools by the thousands. Y'all better hear me. Y'all better hear me. And these academies were found to be illegal and was losing their tax exempt status with the government. Here's the funny thing about this. Falwell and Bob Jones, what have you, were upset because they were getting funded. They were getting tax exemptions by pulling their kids out of public schools. And the government didn't realize that they were supporting this, and it were black people. It was a group of black people who sued and won. And the government came down on these segregated schools, and it was a Republican president who pushed for it. His name was Richard Nixon. So white folks get upset, but it was their own people who turned against them. It was an illegal act. So they lose their tax exempt. Even though white Christians protested that their religious beliefs compelled them to keep the races separated. The Internal Revenue Service moved to revoke the tax exempt status of Bob Jones, which forbade interracial dating. Bob Jones University, up until the year 2000, did not allow interracial dating. Go figure. And even today in the South, there are segregated schools. I'm talking high schools, publicly funded high schools. They got segregated proms and stuff like that. Blacks were denied entry of Bob Jones until 1971. And Falwell was furious about that. How do I know? Because I'm a researcher. I've been following politics since the 1970s, since I was a little boy. I was fascinated by politics. I didn't always understand it. But as I got older and I began to study it, I realized, oh, it makes sense now why I saw him. I didn't see him, why he called me that word, and why he black, but he was called this word. These were little dog whistles and what have you. And my father was code switching. He would talk to a black businessman one way and talk to a white businessman another way. And I realized that was code switching. Didn't understand it. The whole social issue with public aid, I understand why they wanted to get my mama to stop my mama from having more babies, so they wanted to sterilize my mother, and I didn't understand that, and why they wanted to get my father out of the house. I didn't. Why do they want daddy to leave? I didn't understand that. I saw a whole bunch of food stamps show up at the house. I remember going to the public aid office with my mama every month or every few, I don't remember how long, often, okay, and I remember sitting at the desk and they giving her all these stamps and then giving her this money, and then we going to the store and she booklets and all this. I remember all that stuff, and then one day it all stopped. Cold turkey, nothing. And I was like, what's going on? I didn't know that we were living the life of what's the movie, Claudine. I didn't understand. Jerry Falwell, 1958 sermon. The name of his sermon is called Segregation or Integration. Which? Question mark. I'm going to read y'all Falwell's sermon. I'm going to read y'all his sermon. He never, ever apologized for his stance. nor did Bob Jones. They cannot. Never. He just died. And his son would never apologize. Right? And of course, he had to resign because of his craziness. Here's what Jerry Falwell says in his sermon. He says, if Chief Justice Warren and his associates had known God's word and had desired to do the Lord's will, I am quite confident that the 1954 decision would never have been made. The facilities should be separate. When God has drawn a line of distinction, we should not attempt to close that line. The true Negro does not want integration. He realizes his potential is far better among his own race. Integration will destroy our race eventually. Unquote. That's Jerry Falwell, who followed the teachings of Bull Connor and what's the governor down there down south during the time when they wouldn't allow the blacks to vote, voter suppression or what have you. You remember him? George Wallace, I believe it was. Oh, he loved George Wallace. Here's the thing about his sermon statement. Here's the irony. Again, intent. The irony behind his statement is some of that is correct. Some of that is correct. Martin Luther King did the I Have a Dream speech. Okay? He did the I Have a Dream speech. And he talked about whites and blacks and browns and okay, would all come together in one, free at last, okay, all that stuff. And then several years later, he said, my dream was a nightmare. And then he talked about segregation and how he was trying to get the whites and the blacks to come together and be able to work together, live together, and go to school together. And he realized what it really was doing was busting up the black neighborhoods, the mom and pops. We were suffering, and in walked that documentary called Buying Wild Negro. Who was that? The Johnson Corporation. Remember that documentary came out in the 1950s or 60s? They talked about how much money black folks have. Find that for me, Rogers. I know you can find it. I think it's called the Negro, the Buying Wild Negro, something like that. Okay? And when black people decided that they wanted to be with white folks, and these civil rights organizers was trying to get us to do that, he realized that it was doing a disjustice more so than it was doing a justice for us. But the intent of Falwell was segregation today, segregation yesterday, and segregation forever. There it is, selling to the Negro. The secret of selling to the Negro. You all got to watch that. Watch it. W.A. Criswell, the Southern Baptist Convention. Hear me. Here's where the abortion, what's the word? Hypocrisy comes in a major way. Strom Thurmond, there you go. Strom Thurmond's protege. Come on, simply put. W.A. Criswell, very popular among white evangelicals, the Southern Baptist Convention former president, and the pastor of the First Baptist Church in Dallas, Texas. Here's what he said. He said, I have always felt that it was only after a child was born and had a life separate from its mother that it became an individual person. And it has always, therefore, seemed to me that what is best for the mother and for the future should be allowed. Let her do what she want to do. That was W.A. Criswell. Famous. So after his statement, they gave a resolution on abortion. and it was adopted by the Southern Baptist Convention June 1971. Hear what it said. This same religious group said in 1971, before Roe versus Wade, quote, "We call upon the Southern Baptists to work for legislation that will allow the possibility of abortion under such conditions as rape, incest, clear evidence of severe fetal deformity, and carefully ascertained, that is, evidence of the likelihood of damage of the emotional, mental, and physical health of the mother. Other than that, keep the party going." After Roe versus Wade was decided on in June 1974, that same body, the Southern Baptists, reaffirmed their resolution by saying, "We affirm the resolution on the subject adopted by the messengers to the St. Louis Southern Baptist Convention meeting in 1971. These are white folks, conservatives. Abortion was perfect because it housed many of the moral debates. It wasn't about killing an unborn child. It was about politics. Y'all better hear me. This has always been about politics. Right now, even today. It was a perfect thing to jump in. In walks Paul Weyrich. It overlapped with support for desegregation. You see, this has always been about desegregation and racism. So the abortion was a pot with soup in it. Pork belly. So it overlapped with desegregation, women's rights, gay rights, the sexual revolution. So if you fought one, you could fight the others too. So it wasn't until 1976 that the Republican Party added opposition to the abortion rights. 1976. Why? Because they saw a nest egg. They saw the goose that laid the golden egg. Wasn't about abortion. It was about separation. White evangelicals actually do not agree with Catholics. They never have. This was a Catholic fight. But the enemy of mine enemy is my what, y'all? Put that in the comment section. It's always, this is how Donald Trump got in office. Because of his rhetoric. He spoke the way their father Bob Jones and Gerald Falwell spoke. It is in the fabric of who they are. The enemy of mine enemy is my friend. Y'all better hear me. And I'm still a black conservative. Sure don't sound like it, do it. If my family is wrong, I'm going to rebuke my family. When my church is wrong, I rebuke my church. When my pastor is wrong, I rebuke my pastor. If I was married, if my wife was wrong, I rebuke my wife. I'm a black conservative. I rebuke them as much as I rebuke the Democrats. Y'all better hear me. So in walked Judge Alito. Now we're current right now. I'm trying to catch y'all up. Judge Alito. His leaked statement. Okay? This was a justification to overcoming what we call precedence. The Constitution makes no reference to abortion. These are his words that broke a few days ago. The Constitution makes no reference to abortion. And no such right is implicitly protected. Ooh. Alito buried himself with this statement. When I read the statement, I'm not a lawyer. I studied pre-law. So I don't count. But when I read it, I says, wow, I see ambiguity all over this thing. How could you be the chief and use these words knowing, or maybe you don't know, that these lawyers are going to go against this? And no such right is implicitly protected. He says Roe was egregiously wrong from the start. Its reasoning was exceptionally weak. The inescapable conclusion is that a right to abortion is not deeply rooted in the nation's history and traditions. True, but that presents another big problem, several problems to your court, Judge Alito. You just screwed up. And if this becomes the ruling come June or July, the court got a bigger problem on his hand with other stuff. And so do the states. You got to look at the big picture. He says, I consider this an intellectual dishonest. No, he didn't say that. I'm saying this. I'm saying this. This is an intellectually dishonest deflection. Let's use that word. This is one of the greatest deflection in judicial history. Y'all better hear me. His statement is misleading and hypocritical. Why? The Constitution doesn't say that the Supreme Court gets to determine ambiguities in the Constitution. This was a decision that the Supreme Court discovered. So if Judge Alito is correct in his assertion, then this leaked opinion is legally irrelevant because there's nothing in the Constitution saying that the court gets to determine ambiguity, which is what he just did in his statement. So what Alito then goes back hundreds of years prior to the ratification of the Constitution. His statement goes before the ratification of the Constitution, back to what's called common law England, saying that women didn't have reproductive rights. Abortion was considered murder. Therefore, they don't have them today, is what he's saying. So this further proves that our country is not a democracy, because the courts are determining something, and it's almost like they're making laws that is relegated to the Congress, because the majority do not rule in America. Democracy, democracy. The people rule, even if it's poor people. The poor people can rule. And that system is not in our Constitution. The republic, that is. The republic is not in our Constitution. It's not. One nation under God, indivisible, to the republic for which it stands. No. So somebody said this is a democratic republic. No, we're not. We are up under a minority rule, and that rule is called an oligarchy. I have the book over there. We're an oligarchy, the system. Y'all better hear me. Y'all better hear me. Y'all better hear me. So, abortion is a bad thing. I've been saying that all my life. The ones who are fighting it, though, are wicked. I further proved it. I did some statistical research, and you think that voting for a Democratic president causes abortions to rise. The other side think that voting for a Republican president will squash the abortion rate and eventually cause an overturning of Roe versus Wade. Both parties or both people are wrong. You're wrong. Here's the statistics. Since 1973 Roe decision, Republican presidents appointed about 12 Supreme Court justices to the bench. Hear me. 12 Supreme Court justices were Republican appointed. Don't tell me because a Republican president put somebody in the office that they're going to vote, they're going to, rule on conservative value. You use a lie. The Supreme Court is a political branch. You've been lied to. So the Republican presidents appointed 12 Supreme Court justices. Since 1973, the Dems only appointed 4. 4. You're like, no, it's got to be more. Okay. For 49 of the 50 years, Republicans nominated the majority of judges. 49 of the 50 years of Roe versus Wade. Despite this, for 49 of the 50 years, Republicans nominated the majority of judges. Despite this, there was no overturning of Roe. None. Y'all better hear me. I'm going back to my video that our brother Marshall spoke of. In 1992, 5 out of 8 judges were Republican. So when a case came to the court that could have overturned Roe, the Republican appointed judges did not overturn it. Matter of fact, they reaffirmed Roe versus Wade. Y'all better hear me. Y'all better hear me. You can keep voting Republican presidents all you want to, so they can put Republican courts and do all you want to. In 2020, it happened again under Chief Justice John Roberts, who mentioned the stare decisis you'll hear. And the stare decisis is the belief that the court should abide by its legal rulings prior. You understand? The Roe decision in 1973 did not legalize abortion. And reversing it would not make abortion illegal. That's a misnomer. Roe didn't legalize abortion. Y'all think it did. Before Roe in 1972, there were nearly 600,000 legal abortions in the United States. 600,000. Not counting the unreported ones by unlicensed doctors. You want to go further back than that? Sure. In 1776, abortion was legal everywhere in the United States. All right, let's make it further current. 1930s. In the 1930s, there were about 800,000 abortions every year. About the same today. The numbers don't lie. They don't lie. Come on. Somebody mentioned stacking the courts. Diane, that's a whole show. And we're not even going to talk about the presidents. There have been 10 presidents since Roe versus Wade in 1973, that is, 6 of which have been Republican. Yet and still, the horrors and ungodliness of abortions continued under their reign. and a few of them served 2 terms under the same agenda. Terrell, you nailed it. Simply ask, why are the numbers the same and they have more contraceptives? Glad you asked that. Republicans act like America was some Christian utopia before Roe versus Wade. On the contrary, if Roe is overturned, which people believe it will be, the nation won't really feel much at all. This is Y2K. Y'all better hear me. You ain't gonna feel much. The issue is focused on one man. One man. To turn one issue. And when you focus on one man, a presidential candidate, to focus on one major issue and ignoring the human issues, many of the human issues, because abortion is a human issue, but when you focus on that one, you walk away from those who are born and alive. You walk away from those issues. Notice what the man said. Did you hear what he said? Let me fast forward that. This is, look what Arthur said.
Would you want to name
as equalizing income? We talk about fairness as rewarding hard work and personal responsibility. So the first is to be a moralist. The second is what I just said, fight for people, not against things. And then the third big area is going where we're not invited and stealing the best arguments from the left. Talk about social justice, talk about compassion, talk about fairness, and it will be very confusing to the left and highly satisfactory to the people who want to join us.
Social justice and compassion and fairness, all biblical things, all biblical things, which the Republicans, which the conservatives walked away from to focus on one thing that has not really changed. Matter of fact, I'm going to go deeper into this. I'm going to go deeper. In the words of our Lord Savior Jesus, you evangelicals have forgotten a more weightier matter. Yeah. Leftoid and legacy media insurrection against CODIS legitimately that big tech will ignore. Yeah, I'm not understanding that. Okay. I'm going to give y'all some deeper stats that may hurt you. so be sitting down. The abortion have fallen under every president for 4 decades. Here's my favorite phrase. Hear me. Abortion have fallen under every president for 4 decades. It's lower today than before Roe became law. Here's your contraceptive issue there, whoever put that there. This is from the Guttmacher Institute. I'm citing, all right, from 1973 to 2017. Electing a Democrat does not increase abortions, and the abortion rate fell, guess under whose administration? You're gonna be shocked. Abortion fell the most under a man with a Muslim middle name. I'm telling y'all, don't believe the hype. Don't believe the hype. They are lying to you just to get your vote. And again, I'm so pro-life. I'm so pro-life. So my job is to tell y'all the legal issue here and the lies. It fell mostly under the most hated president among white evangelicals, Barack Obama. You can check the stats, because I did. Now watch this, though. Watch this. Under Donald Trump, Planned Parenthood broke its public funding record. They raised more money. They got more tax funding. Tax funding under Donald Trump. I'm trying to tell y'all. Somebody lying to me. So here's what's happening. Things are down. All right? Abortions are down because more women are having fewer unplanned pregnancies. Keep fighting the battle against abortion. Keep going, y'all. Keep going. But y'all are worse. Y'all just as worse as pro-black people who everything is black to them. They see no other color but black. You who are always in front of those Planned Parenthoods and screaming abortion, and that's your whole life, let me tell you, you are missing something. Keep doing that, but you are not well balanced. There are fewer unplanned pregnancies. Reduced teen sexual activity. Your kids ain't having sex that much. They're just not doing it. And women have more access to health care. Adoption is even more affordable. And the states, especially places like Texas, Mississippi, the states have already been putting more restrictions on abortions. So did we even need the Supreme Court? The states have been helping the abortion rate go down for years. And most pro-choice women don't even want to abort. They just want the right to do whatever. They just want the right. Don't tell me about my right or my privilege, my privacy. But they don't even want to abort. They don't want to abort. So when the Republican president nominated these conservative judges, I believe, they committed perjury in the congressional hearings because they wanted the job. Let's prove it.
I believe the Constitution protects the right to privacy. And I have no reason or agenda to prejudge the issue or to predispose to rule one way or the other on the issue of abortion.
Roe versus Wade is an important precedent of the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court has reaffirmed the decision, sometimes on the merits, sometimes in Casey, based on stare decisis. And I think that when a decision is challenged and it is reaffirmed, that strengthens its value.
It is a precedent of the United States Supreme Court. It was reaffirmed in Casey in 1992 and in several other cases. So a good judge will consider it as precedent of the United States Supreme Court, worthy as treatment of precedent like any other.
This is an important precedent of the Supreme Court that's been reaffirmed many times, but then and this is the point I want to make that I think is important, Planned Parenthood versus Casey reaffirmed Roe and did so by considering the stare decisis factors. So Casey now becomes a precedent on precedent.
People use super precedent differently.
Okay.
The way that it's used in the scholarship and the way that I was using it in the article that you're reading from was to define cases that are so well settled that no political actors and no people seriously push for their overruling. And I'm answering a lot of questions about Roe, which I think indicates that Roe doesn't fall in that category. And scholars across the spectrum say that doesn't mean that Roe should be overruled. But descriptively, it does mean that it's not a case that everyone has accepted and doesn't call for its overruling.
Blah, 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 blah. They sat there and says, leave it alone. Stare decisis. The court made a decision. We don't mess with the rulings. They all pretty much said it. The last girl says something a little different by saying, yeah, okay, it's the rule of law, it's settled law, so, but, we got to accept that people are against it. And she gave herself a way out. The other ones, right there, says, leave it alone. And then the leak came. Y'all, you better wake up. You fundamental, hysterical evangelicals who bomb an entire abortion clinic. Yeah, you are murdered. Every group got a radical. I don't think the average, I strongly believe that the average white evangelical who's against abortion would never do that. But the problem with that is guilt. Almost the same kind of guilt, because I made an analogy in that show that Marshall was mentioning. I think I talked about how driving down a white neighborhood with my family in the car and how I got pulled over because I was driving while black in an uppity white neighborhood. Just pulled me over because I was the wrong color. Yet I saw a stray dog walking around the white neighborhood, and they picked that dog up and called the EMT, got it some health care. They was giving it water, and they wanted to they were talking about adopting the dog. I mean, they were treating the dog better than they did a family. I had at the time I was married, my wife and my child was in the back seat. What am I gonna do? I'm getting ready to rob some houses with my family in the car. It just was crazy. And I got pulled over. And when I'm walking up and down in white neighborhoods, even if I had a nice piece of cloth on, white women are clutching their purses. Let a dog walk them down. They're going to give that dog free health care and put that dog on their taxes, in their will. It's just some stuff. Dog whistles are everywhere, y'all. You being lied to, and you jumping on that bandwagon. You're not going to fool me. So what do we do with this? Well, just because something has been a law for 50 years, it still don't make it right, y'all. You who are for killing a child, again, I've said this 3 or 4 times since I've been on the show. All right? You all calling it a cluster of cells, I still stand by this whole thing. The ruling can affect other rulings, all right? If they are going to rule on this, then the privacy of abortion is not in the Constitution. It said, therefore, what Alito says, okay? Gay marriage is up, and then the contraceptive issue, Criswell, I think it's called, the Criswell is up, all right, for some decision making, okay? And so Alito's statement, he kind of messed up when he did that, because these cases are not in the Constitution, so it's really about ambiguity. So what's going to happen? The Democrats are going to try to fight back. It's a losing cause, because then they're going to try and do a codified, it's called, of the women's rights to choose. And you don't have the votes in the Senate, you understand? And so because you don't have the votes in the Senate, and especially due to the filibuster is still enacted, and the filibuster is not a constitutional thing, it's just a procedural thing, the filibuster, all right? And so until they can get rid of that, which not that easy, trying to codify this is going to die, all right? And so if the ruling comes down in June, July, then what's going to happen are these states are going to implement what's called trigger laws. That means right away it's illegal, and women are going to have to travel 1,000 miles in some cases to get an abortion. So is this going to really affect the lives of many people? Yes. Is it going to cause a shift in American politics? Nah. It's Y2K. No, we good, y'all. Y'all are crying fire in a crowded theater. The Republicans are making this a case of leak. All right, turn on Fox News. It's all about the leak. It's not about the women rights of abortion, about killing a child, because it's unpopular to talk about abortion right now on the Republican end. It becomes a political issue because they keep defending the leak. That's it. Go after the leaker. Who did it? That's all they're talking about for the past 2-3 days. Leak, 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 leak. Which tells me that this is, again, a textbook case of fraud. This is textbook case of fraud. The ACLU, remember them back in the Scopes monkey trial? They were talking on the news and they said that abortion is 14 times safer than childbirth. They said abortion is a moral act. If you want to do it, you should kill this child. They said black alleys and self-induced abortions will continue. Black and brown people will be affected the most. The ACLU, the civil liberties, was obvious they're going to say that. I mean, they are an immoral group saying that doing it is a moral act. Well, it's obviously how the world feels about things like that. So I stand with those who fighting against this immoral act of abortion. Always have. The problem here is sin. Here's why I minister to you. It's sin. The passing of a law to go against a sinful act. The sin of molestation. The sin of rape. The sin of incest. The sin of adultery, and the sin of fornication. The government is trying to pass laws to fix a sinful act. It's not really the job of the government to try and pass laws on the moral aspects of what men and women do. But that's what this is all about, and you've got to see that. You understand? Rape and incest is constantly a thing that pops up. And so it becomes a case of this is two wrongs making it right. What about rape and incest? 1% of women, the cases are due that go through this is due to maybe a rape or incest. I mean, that's how low it is. It's like 1-2%. And so do you take that small percentage and change a whole thing, or is this a case of collateral damage? You remember the taking the vaccine? Y'all remember that? And people were saying we should kill the vaccine because a few people were getting sick and dying because they are allergic to the vaccine. That's what I'm seeing here. The masses, by the millions, lives were changed, were saved because of the vaccine. This is collateral damage. If this law is then, if they rule on this thing and people start, I believe what's going to happen is white evangelicals are going to start screaming, because the repercussions of it can be dire, because then they're going to start talking about overpopulation. I'm trying to tell y'all. So the system that we have right now, I still believe is the best system. The best system. Freedom is costly. This nation has been a free nation since its inception. And the cost of freedom, you can't afford it. You just can't afford it. All right? I know a woman who aborted her child. She says, Walter, this is just a cluster of cells. So she went and got an abortion for a cluster of cells. A few years later, she got married, got pregnant, had a miscarriage, and she wept over the death of her cluster of cells. I didn't want to bring that up immediately, but you know I had to bring it up. I said, Missy Ann, yes, it was a cluster of cells when you didn't want the child. But once you entered into holy matrimony, you got pregnant, and then that child became, or that cluster of cells became, a precious commodity that you want to continue to grow in your belly. And when you lost it, it wasn't born, you lost it early in the pregnancy, and you wept over it. So which one is it? Was it a cluster of cells, or was it a real human being growing in your belly? I said, you represent millions of people out there with this mindset. Ambiguity of the Constitution. I'm going full circle. You're under new management. Your thought pattern becomes under new management. Judgment Day is going to be a very interesting day. It is going to be the most scariest day in the world for billions. Because many of us have conformed in our thoughts, but yet we don't even know it. One state decided, I can't remember which state, it might be in the bread box, the bread basket, said that if Roe is overturned, then having an abortion will be considered homicide. That's funny, because how can a person kill so many babies in that state over 50 years? And it's okay, because it's in a law. And then after the law is overturned by the stroke of one pen, the next time you do it, it is now homicide. Ain't that something? What a drastic switch. That's a magic dollar. You remember the dollar, the magic dollar I put up there? I did. I talked about how the dollar is worthless. They say it's worth $1, but it's backed by nothing. And I remember when I ripped the dollar in half, and now I said, this dollar is now worth nothing because it's been ripped in half. I can't take one half of the dollar and buy anything. And remember when I went and got some Scotch tape? And I put some Scotch tape and put the dollar back together again, and I says, this dollar now reverts back to what it was worth before it was ripped. Remember when I did that? I can take that Scotch tape dollar bill and go buy the same thing that I can buy with an unbroken dollar. It's a magic dollar. And that's what you're going to see. Y'all better hear me. Y'all better hear me. The state of Louisiana. There it is. Louisiana. So what is the one scripture that I told y'all that I was going to find that sums all this up about intent? Turn with me to Philippians chapter 1 as I shut this down. Philippians chapter 1. And I guess we could start, I don't know, at the 15th verse. Let's go here. Philippians 1. Let's start at the 12th verse here. And I want you to know, my dear brothers and sisters, that everything that has happened to me here has helped to spread the good news. Listen very closely to what Paul is saying. This is how I'm going to end this. For everyone here, including the whole palace guard, knows that I am in chains because of Christ. And because of my imprisonment, most of the believers here have gained confidence and boldly speaks God's message without fear. That's one group here. It's one group. It's true that some are preaching out of jealousy. Right here. Now, it's true. Some are preaching against abortion. It's true. Some are preaching the gospel out of jealousy and rivalry. But others preach about Christ with pure motives. I'm against abortion because my motives are pure. They preach because they love me, for they know I have been appointed to defend the good news. Those others do not have pure motives as they preach against abortion. They preach with self-ambition, not sincerely, intended to make my chains more painful to me. But that doesn't matter. Here's my point right here. Whether their motives are false or genuine, or they just wanted a vote, the message about abortion or Christ is being preached either way. So I rejoice, and I will continue to rejoice. For I know that you pray for me, and the Spirit of Jesus Christ help me. This will lead to my deliverance. If the intent is about politics, but yet I have saved the lives of millions of babies. Paul said, I guess it don't matter. Save the babies. Save them. Because I'm tired of fighting with these subgroups. I'm wore out. And I would be just as guilty to spend so much time fighting them about their intent and not tending to weightier matters. And there are three matters that Jesus said when he was mentioning paying tithes. Justice is the one that jumps out of the page. The second one is called mercy. And the other one, I believe, is faithfulness. Faith. He says you're doing things politically and under the law. That's what you do, he says, but you are forgetting justice and mercy. So when you're fighting for an unborn, keep fighting for the life of someone who don't have a decision of their own. They don't have the power. Because someone said that the mother's belly is the most dangerous place. That could be true depending on the owner of that belly. But if you're going to fight for the fetus, fight for when that fetus exits the mother's body. Unfortunately, you have a habit of abandoning the fetus once it exits the body and continues life. You don't give a care. And it is proven on how you act and in your policies. You heard Arthur I'm not going to play him again, but you heard what he said. You're fighting against stuff. You're fighting against people. But what is your intent? To get a man in the office to fight over this one thing that you still don't understand. Number two, you don't even know the beginnings of who you are. Your forefathers were racists and bigots, and you don't even know that you got their seed growing in you. Murray says they're not really pro-life, they're pro-birth. That's the problem that I'm having with you today. So my words to you on the spiritual level is to go back to your first works, your first love, that is. Your first love was Jesus Christ. That's your first, should have been your first love. And like I told the Native Americans when I was living in South Dakota, I was speaking to the Lakota people, and I told them that the government can't help you. I, a black man, can't help you either. You are going to have to help yourself. I need you to go back to your villages. Go back. Because you are a sovereign people. And go back and talk to your people and compel them. Teach them the scriptures. And find a way to rescue one child at a time. I can't do it. I have to look after my own people because they hear me and I speak their language. I don't speak your language. You're going to have to go and speak to them people. You who are white evangelicals, you know what people are saying about you. And you deny every word because you listen to one media platform. One. Even though a couple others popped up, but that one right there. Other medias are feeding off of that one. And that's all you see, and the world you see is through the lens of that one media. And you're just as bad as these pro-black folks and these Hebrew Israelites who stand on the corner and call you white devil. All of us are jacked up. And until we all go back to the tenets of our faith and put our faith into the scriptures and read the history of how God dealt with the Jewish people and how they too committed disjustice. He called it perverted justice. The major prophets, the minor prophets from Amos to Malachi, Ezekiel and Jeremiah and Isaiah, all through the scriptures you see perverted justice. And God kept punishing the people of Israel who had a governmental setup. There was the king, the prophet, and the priest. That was the government. And then there were the poor. And all through the Old Testament, God kept rebuking them for perverted justice, not tending to the poor, to the point where he said, you've done such a disjustice to those people. He says that you are worse than Sodom and Gomorrah. You're worse than Sodom and Gomorrah. He says, I'm going to restore Sodom and her wealth. He says, well, reluctantly, I'm going to have to restore you too, but I'm going to have to put a fierce punishment on you because you've done worse than her. Now, he's talking to the Jewish people at that time. Well, with you, I don't know what God's going to do to you. America, you have delved the people a grave sin. You have sinned against the people here. Horrible sin. Despicable, inexcusable sin. It's an abomination what you've done to these people, an abomination. And you're still doing it, and you hid up under the blanket of Christianity. The United States is the 12th It's 12 in the list of rich nations that are religious. 12. And falling every year. Falling. So God is judging us. So, let these judges do what they do, because God is meddling in our politics. He's meddling, and I'm glad he is. This is a wake-up call, and because the midterm election is coming and God is playing chess, and he made sure this got leaked so that y'all can talk and so that y'all can be divided. See, God is the one that's doing this. Y'all like, what? No, God is a sovereign, loving God. Okay, read Ezekiel chapter 37, 38, and 39, how God himself says, I'm going to put these hooks in the nose of the nations, and I'm going to cause division among them. So that's what he's doing. He is playing chess in heaven, and he's using the Supreme Court justice, because I told y'all for the past few years that's what he's going to do. And he's doing exactly what I saw him doing. And that midterm election coming in another couple, depending on what time you're watching this, that midterm election, I'm going to sit back with popcorn and crack up because I'm going to see where God put his pawn, what do you call those pawns? I'm going to see where God put his pawns, all right? I'm going to see where he put it. And come the midterm election, when it's over, I'm going to sit back and look at all the winnings and say, yep, God, you're working. I see what you did there. I see what you did. Now I got a bigger job to do. I got to get out there and win the loss as much as I can. I see you, God. I see you. God, I thank you for your presence, and your glory has filled the room. And I love you for what you've given us, the wisdom that you pour down into the people of God. They're here. I see them in the comment section. People here are divided on what I said here. There's someone here who's been every 3 seconds, they're commenting over here. I see every 3 seconds, one person is commenting. Every 3 seconds, it's 2 seconds, 1 second. The keyboard, their fingers got to be hurting because of what I've been saying for this past hour and a half or so. I get it. We are still a nation divided. I'll take it because as long as we're divided, that gives us who are Evangelion or evangelist, Paul says, to do the work of an evangelist. Reprove and rebuke and correct, and that's what I'm doing, but also instruct and lift up and encourage those in the Lord. So I'm doing it, oh God, so continue to bless my home as you have been doing in my posterity. Those who are deciding tonight to stump out the life of a child, let them hear the voice. Allow them to hear the voice of the Spirit of God as he's telling them, don't do it. Don't do it. I pray for the health of all, not just the child growing, but the mother who is going to make a decision. Help us, oh God, to be strong and to be a little more bold as we go out there and have a well-balanced evangelistic road that we travel down. All issues are important to you. They are important to us as well. We love you, God, and we give your name the praise. The glory shall be yours. In Jesus' name, amen. 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 All right, take care of yourselves and one another. For those of you who've been wondering about the final exam, yeah, I'm still working on it. Trying to make some tweaks to the website. It's not that easy, but once I fix it, then it'll be easy, okay? So, Munkers, those of you who was in part of the university class that we held, don't worry. I'm working on it every day. And if you haven't received anything from the week 8, let me know. I think I took care of everybody. But if I missed your email, send me one at giftedfriends1@gmail.com and be looking for the advanced teachings coming real soon. Of course, I've got a lot of traveling to do, so it won't happen in the next couple of weeks. That's not happening. All right? I appreciate y'all. All right. Would you please hit the share or the bell notifications on YouTube? Now there's about 200 of y'all, a few hundred of y'all watching. But on YouTube, if you all just hit the thumbs up right quick, all right, about 173 I see there. If you hit the thumbs up right now, I need about 100 of you to hit that. Then this will be shared among people who now have the truth of what this whole abortion thing is all about. And so that these both black and white conservatives would pay close attention to the well-balancedness of this thing, and so they can be more informed. They're going to go against what I said. I get it. Because as there's an old saying, a man convinced against his will is of the same will still. It's all cognitive dissonance based. You know, people just believe one thing and they don't care if the facts are pushed in their face. They got to believe it because they are tribal people, patriotic to one person, all right? And it doesn't matter. This is how Donald Trump was able to walk in and take over the Republican Party because robots continue to do what they were programmed to do. They master programmed them to do certain things, and they are programmed, all right? Jim Jones came and gave them Kool-Aid, and they died because they were programmed, all right? So y'all all be careful. Test everything, all right? Ronald Reagan, the great Republican, said himself, agree but verify, okay? All right? Ronald Reagan was the governor of California for years, and he was pro-choice. Do you hear me? Ronald Reagan didn't have no problem in the bills that he signed, that abortion was fine. It wasn't until he began to run for the presidency and he saw a gold mine in the white evangelicals. They invited him to speak, and then he spoke on their behalf, and they said, here is our man. They got him in the office, and Ronald Reagan didn't pass anything for white evangelicals. And Jerry Falwell, I remember when I was young, and I heard him say on the television, I will never again support a political candidate. I'm done. We're going back to church, and we're going to preach the gospel of Jesus Christ, and black folks separate with black folks. Y'all can't come, okay? And that's all we're going to do, because Ronald Reagan let them down. It was too late, though, because they rallied to bring in all of these evangelical votes. They didn't want no politics because of the monkey trial. And Falwell went out there, and Paul Weyrich went out there, and they brought all these folks in, and now they're in. And when a dog bites you and tastes blood, he want more blood. That's why they got to kill the dog. All right? And so white evangelicals are in, so they voted for Ronald Reagan. He let them down, and they kept voting Republican. They're in there now. They got George Bush in there, and they because he was talking Jesus Christ, the Son of the living God, and he too let them down. And they kept doing it, and so this is why they praised Trump. They praised him. They want him back in there because he gave them the illusion that no other president that they brought in have done. He gave them the illusion, and it worked. It worked. I'll talk about that later. All right, y'all, take care of yourself and one another. We'll see you all whenever I see you all. Y'all had a lot of comments, but I wanted to get my teaching in and then go up here and drink some tea. It's been 2 hours. Y'all go to bed. Yeah, that's right, Michelle. Ronald Reagan had two faces. He had two faces. And if y'all want to check my statistics, go to the PBS special called God in America. It's about 4-5 episodes. And it's some good stuff in there. And pick up some of the books. All right? Read for yourself and stop listening to these people on YouTube like me. Don't take our word for it. Just go and do your own studies, and then you could be Bereans yourselves. All right? I take no words back tonight. It's settled law, and I'm done. Take care of one another. Bye-bye. Joe Nathan. Hey, why you come back home, man? Why you do this stuff? You understand how important you are out there? You don't need to be coming back home in little spaces like this, man.
You gotta come back home.
I don't want to. I don't understand that. Don't we supposed to?
See, you see, right there,
Right.
look at the camera. This right here is a mixture of all the organist butt print.
That's true.
I'm part of this.
That is so true. Ed Showers, Chuck Longstreet,
Walter Jones.
I heard about him. Kenneth Wright. Oh man, so many greats. Are you still watching Coco Melon? I guess not. I guess not.
Well, goodbye. 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 Enjoy yourself. Bye. Goodbye. 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 Bye. Well, goodbye. 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 Goodbye.
It's 10 p.m. Do you know where your children are?
Fellas, does it seem like you can't get a good woman? Ladies, wonder why you can't keep a man? Then read The 4 Women That Men Desire, Volume 1, by Sirwalterj to figure out how to break the cycle. Go to Amazon.com to get your copy today.
Sir Walter Jones Show. Goodbye.